The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the suburban courthouse, illuminating the polished wooden benches and the muted cream walls. It was quiet, almost deceptively calm, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Inside, the air was heavy with anticipation. Emily sat near the front of the courtroom, her hands tightly gripping the small, worn handle of her purse. On her lap, her 3-year-old daughter, Lily, held a stuffed dog named Max, her tiny fingers clutching him as though he were her shield against the uncertainty of the day. Emily's eyes were red from sleepless nights, the kind of nights when worry doesn't allow even 10 minutes of uninterrupted rest. Today was the culmination of months of tension, legal battles, and emotional turmoil, a custody hearing against her daughter's father, Daniel. He was sitting across the room, perfectly composed, with a calmness that unnerved Emily. He didn't fidget, didn't glance around nervously like she did. Daniel had a quiet confidence, the kind that suggested he believed the law would favor him, and perhaps in his mind it should. The courtroom itself was a mix of stark professionalism and the hum of whispered speculation. Lawyers shuffled papers, whispered to colleagues, and exchanged subtle gestures that only they could understand. Reporters tapped furiously on laptops, scribbled notes, and occasionally glanced up at the audience, hoping to catch some hint of drama. And then there was Judge Harmon, seated high above the room in his leather chair, observing silently. His eyes scanned the room with a practiced patience, a calm that only came from years of overseeing conflicts that had nothing to do with innocence or love. Emily tried to focus on Lily. She looked down at the little girl whose brown curls fell messily over her forehead. Lily's round eyes were wide, innocent, and absorbing every detail of this intimidating new world. She clutched Max tightly, as though the stuffed dog could somehow protect her from the stern-faced adults, the raised voices, and the looming legal authority. Emily whispered softly, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's right here," brushing her daughter's hair back and planting a gentle kiss on her forehead. Lily looked up, blinking slowly, her large eyes meeting her mother. It was an unusual moment of clarity. For a 3-year-old, she seemed to understand that today was important. She didn't fully grasp the legal intricacies, of course, but she could sense her mother's anxiety, the tension in the air, and the heavy weight of expectation from all the adults around her. Something about the room felt electric, a static that only children can feel when grown-ups pretend to be calm but fail. Daniel's presence added another layer to the tension. He was immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, sitting with his posture perfectly straight. His expression was neutral, but his eyes betrayed a quiet determination. Daniel had believed from the very beginning that custody would go his way. He had arguments about stability, finances, and long-term planning. But what he hadn't anticipated was the emotional undercurrent in the courtroom, the subtle, powerful bond between mother and child, visible to everyone who cared to look. Emily's lawyer, a woman named Margaret, was seated next to her, reviewing notes one last time. Margaret's voice had the soft authority of someone who had been through countless custody hearings. She leaned down to whisper, "Don't worry, Emily. Just stay calm and let Lily guide us if she wants to say something." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. She knew Margaret was right. Lily was small, but her instincts and emotional honesty could speak volumes in ways lawyers and judges often overlooked. The spectators in the courtroom were a mix of family members, neighbors, and curious onlookers. Some were sympathetic to Emily, some quietly rooting for Daniel. Cameras flashed occasionally, capturing the tension, but no one could predict that the real story of the day wouldn't come from legal arguments or strategic maneuvers. It would come from the tiny child on her mother's lap. As the lawyers began their opening statements, the atmosphere thickened. Daniel's attorney painted a picture of the father as the logical choice for custody, stable, financially secure, with a home full of structure and opportunity. Emily's lawyer countered with a different argument: love, consistency, and the emotional nurturing that only a mother could provide. It was a battle of facts versus feelings, reason versus instinct. Each side punctuated their statements with passion, occasionally glancing at Lily as if to measure her reaction. Lily, for her part, sat quietly. She didn't fidget or cry, she simply hugged Max and observed. She noticed the small details adults often overlooked, the sharp tone of Daniel's voice when he spoke, the gentle reassurance in Emily's whispers, the subtle sighs from people in the gallery. For a 3-year-old, this was a world of sound, movement, and emotion, a place far more complex than any playground or nursery she had ever known. Yet there was an unmistakable clarity in her gaze, as if she were weighing her options carefully in the silent language only children understand. Time seemed to stretch. The judge, known for his meticulous deliberation, watched both parents closely. Emily's hands trembled slightly, a mixture of nervousness and hope. Daniel's eyes were fixed on the proceedings, calculating, precise, but no one anticipated the quiet revolution about to occur. Emily leaned forward, whispering softly to Lily, "You're safe, baby. It's okay. Just stay with me." Lily hugged Max a little tighter, nodding slowly. Her small voice, not yet ready to speak out loud in such a formal setting, was nonetheless preparing for a moment that would astonish everyone in the room. The room remained charged with tension, every heartbeat echoing through the wooden floors and high ceilings. It was a moment suspended between expectation and surprise. Lawyers prepared their next points, witnesses adjusted their seating, and the judge tapped his gavel lightly, signaling the beginning of the next phase. And then in the quiet of the courtroom, the tiniest figure, 3 years old, clutching a stuffed dog, was about to speak. No one in that room, not the reporters, the lawyers, the judge, or even Daniel, could anticipate how powerful, simple, and transformative those words would be. Lily, in her innocence, would soon remind everyone that clarity and courage sometimes come in the smallest packages. For Emily, it was a moment of fear mixed with hope. For Daniel, it was the unexpected, something beyond strategy, beyond argument. And for the courtroom, it was a prelude to a lesson in love, innocence, and the undeniable power of a child's voice. The tension was no longer just legal, it had become profoundly human. The courtroom settled into an uneasy rhythm as the hearing progressed. The air was thick with anticipation, each word spoken echoing louder than intended, each pause pregnant with unspoken meaning. Emily's lawyer, Margaret, spoke first, her voice calm yet firm, weaving a narrative that highlighted months of dedication, late nights, and countless small sacrifices Emily had made to provide a loving home for Lily. She spoke of bedtime routines, early morning hugs, and the careful nurturing of Lily's curiosity, details that might seem mundane, yet in that courtroom they carried immeasurable weight. Emily listened intently, glancing down at Lily every few seconds. Her daughter's tiny hand rested atop Max, her stuffed dog, fingers clutching him tightly as if he were a talisman protecting her from the formal, intimidating world around her. Lily didn't make a sound. She simply watched, her wide brown eyes following every movement, every subtle gesture from the adults around her. Somehow, Emily felt a quiet strength in that gaze, a reassurance that her daughter understood more than she had expected. When Daniel's lawyer rose to speak, the room's tension shifted subtly. There was a quiet confidence in his tone as he outlined Daniel's stability, a structured home, a stable income, and a life that promised order and safety. He emphasized that children thrived under predictability and argued that, though Emily's love was undeniable, the court needed to consider Lily's future from a practical standpoint. The words were precise, rehearsed, and polished. To some in the courtroom, they sounded convincing. To others, they felt cold, lacking the warmth of genuine care. Emily's stomach knotted with a mix of anger and frustration. She wanted to speak out, to counter every calculated phrase, but Margaret's reassuring hand on her shoulder reminded her to wait. The strategy was clear. Let the lawyers do their work, but let Lily's truth, should it emerge, speak louder than any argument. Throughout the exchange, Lily remained quietly observant. 3 years old, yet her senses were heightened in ways that most adults overlooked. She noticed the small details. The gentle tone in her mother's voice contrasted with the clipped precision of Daniel, the fidgeting of the court stenographer, the subtle nods from certain spectators, and even the almost imperceptible shift in Judge Harmon's gaze as he scanned the room. For a toddler, it was a flood of information, overwhelming yet strangely clear. Lily was beginning to understand that her opinion, her voice, might carry significance even if she didn't fully grasp why. The gallery whispered among themselves, their murmurs a low hum under the formalities of the proceedings. Neighbors and family members exchanged glances, some nodding in support of Emily, others reserving judgment until the facts were fully presented. The reporters, typing furiously, were clearly following the legal narrative, expecting a predictable conclusion. They had not anticipated that the real story, the one that would capture hearts, was sitting quietly on Emily's lap. Margaret shifted the focus from logistics to emotions, telling stories of Lily's laughter, the way she would greet her mother each morning with a hug, and the bedtime rituals that had formed the foundation of their bond. The courtroom, for a moment, seemed to breathe differently. Faces softened. Even some of Daniel's supporters glanced down, unable to resist the humanity of the anecdotes. The emotional current running through the room was subtle but unmistakable. Daniel's lawyer countered with facts, numbers, and schedules. He spoke of a carefully planned environment, extracurricular activities, and a home where rules would be enforced without compromise. His tone was measured, professional, and slightly detached. To some, it appeared logical and reasonable. To others, it seemed to overlook the most crucial element: Lily's happiness, her comfort, and the emotional security she had developed with her mother. Emily's heart ached as she listened, feeling the weight of every word. She squeezed Lily's hand gently, silently conveying reassurance and hope. Lily responded by tightening her grip on Max, almost as if the stuffed dog were the anchor grounding her through the tension. Emily whispered softly, "You're okay, baby. Just stay close to Mommy." Lily's small nod was almost imperceptible, but it was enough to give Emily courage. The judge, known for his meticulous attention to detail, remained composed. His eyes flicked between the parents, scanning for inconsistencies, searching for truth in both facts and emotions. He rarely displayed bias, yet there was something in the room that even he could not ignore, a tension beyond legalities, a current of human emotion that demanded recognition. He made a mental note to observe Lily carefully. Children, even toddlers, sometimes revealed truths adults could not articulate. The hearing moved into the presentation of witnesses. Emily's mother spoke first, recounting the daily care Emily provided and the deep bond Lily shared with her mother. Her voice wavered slightly as she described Lily's attachment, but the courtroom listened intently. Daniel's father followed, emphasizing stability and security, painting a picture of a life that seemed orderly, safe, and predictable. Each side presented carefully curated evidence, trying to sway the judge in a battle of emotion versus practicality. Yet amid all the speeches and testimony, Lily remained quietly observant. She watched Daniel's gestures, his attempts to appear confident and composed, and she compared them to the warmth she felt from her mother. For a child, the difference was striking. One offered structure, the other offered love, comfort, and an unshakable sense of safety. And though Lily was only 3, she understood the weight of these differences in a way that no adult could ignore. Margaret leaned closer to Emily, whispering, "Judge Harmon may ask Lily what she wants. It's unusual, but it can make a difference." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Could her daughter truly express herself? Could 2 words or even a simple gesture tip the scales? The thought was at once terrifying and hopeful. Emily squeezed Lily's hand tighter, feeling the small fingers respond with an almost imperceptible pressure. It was a quiet promise between mother and child. They would face this together. Daniel shifted in his seat, glancing at Lily. There was curiosity in his eyes, tinged with uncertainty. He had not anticipated that a 3-year-old might hold such influence, that a tiny voice could carry a weight beyond legal arguments or financial stability. His confidence faltered slightly, though he did not reveal it openly. He, like everyone else, sensed that the balance in the courtroom might hinge on something far more human than any evidence or testimony presented. As the opening statements concluded, the courtroom seemed to settle into a tense lull. Everyone anticipated the next phase, the questioning of the parents and perhaps, though few dared hope, the direct address to Lily herself. Emily adjusted her position, holding her daughter close. Lily, still clutching Max, seemed to absorb every sound, every movement, every emotion swirling around her. For the adults in the room, it was a legal battle. For Lily, it was a landscape of feelings, a map of the people she loved, and a place where she might, in her own way, speak a truth that no adult argument could convey. The tension was palpable. The spectators leaned forward slightly, whispers fading to silence as the next moment approached. Emily's mind raced, wondering if her daughter could, or would, express what she truly felt. Daniel's composed exterior hinted at curiosity, perhaps even a flicker of worry. The judge, ever observant, remained still, knowing that sometimes the most unexpected moments in court come from those least expected. And in the quiet, Lily prepared herself. She did not yet understand the full scope of the legal battle, the consequences, or the strategies at play. But she understood something far more profound. She loved her mother, she felt safe with her, and in her own way she was ready to speak, ready to remind the adults around her that truth, in its simplest form, often comes from the purest hearts. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Judge Harmon cleared his throat, signaling a brief pause in the flurry of legal arguments. The echoes of the lawyers' words lingered, but the air had shifted. Everyone sensed it, the impending moment where law and emotion might collide in a way no one could predict. Judge Harmon adjusted his robe slightly and leaned forward, his gaze settling on the smallest occupant of the room, 3-year-old Lily. She sat perched on Emily's lap, her tiny fingers entwined with Max, her stuffed dog, which she hugged tightly as if it were a lifeline. "Lily," the judge said gently, his deep voice calm but inviting, "I would like to hear from you. Can you tell me, who do you want to stay with?" A hush fell over the courtroom. The murmur of spectators faded into silence. Reporters stopped typing, their pens frozen mid-sentence. The lawyers stiffened, caught between procedural hesitation and a recognition that this was extraordinary. Emily's heart lurched in her chest. Could a 3-year-old truly respond in such a moment? Could Lily articulate something that would carry meaning in a room filled with logic, legal strategies, and adult expectations? Emily gently lifted Lily to make eye contact. "Sweetie," she whispered softly, "it's okay. You can tell him what you feel. Mommy's right here." Lily's wide brown eyes darted from her mother to the judge, then toward Daniel, who remained impeccably still, his posture stiff but his curiosity clear. The courtroom seemed to shrink, focusing on the tiny figure who suddenly bore the weight of everyone's attention. Her lips trembled slightly, a mixture of nervousness and determination, but her gaze was unwavering. Max, her loyal companion, remained tucked under her chin, almost as if lending silent courage. Judge Harmon leaned back slightly, giving Lily the time she needed. He had presided over countless custody cases, but few moments had carried such raw anticipation. It was unusual for a judge to directly address a toddler, yet he knew the law allowed for consideration of a child's preference, even at this young age. Still, he did not expect the weight and clarity with which a small voice could impact the lives of so many. The spectators, sensing the gravity of the moment, were silent. Emily's mother pressed her lips together, trying not to cry, while Daniel's father shifted in his seat, eyebrows raised in surprise. Even the court reporters, trained to maintain detachment, seemed captivated, leaning forward ever so slightly. The entire room had become acutely aware that this was no ordinary custody hearing. Lily's tiny hands clenched Max tighter as she took a deep breath. Her innocence and clarity made her unusually aware of the emotions swirling around her. She didn't yet understand the legal complexities, the arguments about stability or schedules, but she understood love, safety, and the quiet assurance of her mother's presence. For Lily, the choice was simple, though the moment felt monumental. Emily whispered again, "Mommy's right here, baby. Just speak from your heart." Lily's small voice wavered at first, barely above a whisper. The courtroom leaned in collectively, straining to hear her. Then slowly, deliberately, she spoke. "Mom, please." The words, so simple, carried a weight that reverberated through the room. A hush swept over the courtroom like a sudden gust of wind. Emily's eyes filled with tears instantly, and she wrapped her arms tightly around her daughter. Daniel blinked, his composed exterior cracking just slightly. The judge, experienced in navigating human emotion in the courtroom, paused, momentarily struck by the power of such clarity from such a small child. The words were so concise, so unadorned, yet they spoke volumes. They transcended arguments about stability, income, and structured routines. They communicated a bond, a sense of safety, and a preference rooted in love. Everyone in the courtroom felt it, the undeniable truth that this tiny voice, fragile yet firm, could not be ignored. Margaret, Emily's lawyer, exhaled softly, a mix of relief and admiration passing across her face. She had anticipated that Lily might speak, but nothing could have prepared her for the perfect timing, the purity, and the sincerity of those two words. She leaned slightly closer to Emily, whispering, "She did it. She spoke from her heart." The courtroom reacted subtly but powerfully. Witnesses who had sat stoically began to blink back tears. Emily's mother dabbed at her eyes, unable to suppress a trembling smile. Even Daniel's lawyer paused mid-note, clearly affected by the unexpected turn. It was as if Lily's innocence had bypassed all professional detachment and pierced directly to the human core of everyone present. Daniel's expression was complex. Pride, regret, and surprise flickered across his face. He had been confident, composed, and certain that logic and planning would win the day. Yet here was a reminder that the law did not operate solely on facts, schedules, or finances. It also accounted for the deepest needs of a child, her voice, her feelings, and her well-being. Lily had reminded everyone of a truth adults often overlooked: emotional bonds could outweigh material stability. Max, the little stuffed dog, seemed almost symbolic in the moment. Lily held him as tightly as she held onto the courage to speak. He had been her companion through quiet nights, long car rides, and moments of fear. In a way, Max had carried the silent weight of her bravery, allowing Lily to voice what she felt without hesitation. Judge Harmon cleared his throat softly, regaining his composure. "Thank you, Lily," he said gently. "I understand your words and I appreciate your honesty. Everyone in this room has heard you." His acknowledgement was calm yet deliberate, signaling the importance of the moment. He didn't rush the proceedings, allowing the courtroom to process what had just occurred. The spectators remained silent, captivated by the gravity and simplicity of the moment. Emily hugged Lily close, whispering, "You're amazing, baby. You did it." Lily nestled against her mother, her small head resting on Emily's shoulder, as though she were aware that her words had changed everything. Even the lawyers were momentarily speechless. Legal strategy, prepared arguments, and evidence suddenly felt secondary. They had witnessed the profound power of truth, expressed simply and clearly by the smallest person in the room. Daniel shifted uncomfortably but maintained a respectful silence. He had witnessed something he could not control or contest: a child expressing her preference with clarity, honesty, and unmistakable emotion. The courtroom's focus had shifted from legal maneuvering to human understanding, from rules and logic to the delicate, irreplaceable bond between a mother and her child. Emily felt a surge of relief and hope. She had worried endlessly about this moment, about whether her daughter could communicate her feelings, and now she saw the result: a clear, simple declaration that resonated far beyond words. She whispered softly, holding Lily even closer, "It's okay, baby. I hear you. I love you." The judge nodded subtly, his eyes thoughtful. He had heard many testimonies over his career, but few moments had carried such clarity, honesty, and emotional power. He would consider these words carefully, knowing that while legal considerations remained, the human element, the voice of a child, could not be discounted. The courtroom slowly exhaled, the tension shifting from anxious anticipation to quiet reflection. Witnesses wiped away tears discreetly, Reporters exchanged astonished glances, and even Daniel's father looked on with a mixture of admiration and resignation. Lily had, in her innocent way, changed the energy of the room, reminding everyone that sometimes the simplest truth is the most powerful. And in that quiet, charged moment, it became clear. The next steps in this custody case would not be determined solely by schedules, financial stability, or structured arguments. They would be influenced profoundly and irrevocably by the courage, clarity, and love expressed by a tiny voice that had just spoken 2 words. "Mom, please." The courtroom seemed to freeze in time, as if Lily's 2 small words, "Mom, please," had stopped the very air from moving. Every person present, from the judge to the reporters in the gallery, was caught in a moment of stunned silence. It was as though those 2 words carried not just meaning, but an invisible force that rippled through the room, touching hearts and softening the sharp edges of tension. Emily's eyes filled instantly with tears, blurring the view of the courtroom, but she didn't care. She instinctively pulled Lily closer, holding her daughter tightly to her chest, feeling the warmth of her small body, the heartbeat of life she had nurtured every day. "Oh, baby," Emily whispered, her voice shaking, "you're amazing." Daniel, sitting across the room, blinked, caught off guard. He had expected resistance, silence, perhaps even confusion from the child, but not this. Not a clear, articulate expression of her feelings that cut through every argument, every legal point, every claim of stability or reason. For the first time that day, he looked uncertain. His composed exterior wavered, and the carefully constructed aura of confidence he had carried into the courtroom seemed fragile, suddenly less authoritative. Judge Harmon leaned back in his chair, momentarily speechless. He had presided over countless custody cases, but he had rarely encountered a moment so powerful and pure. Judges are trained to weigh evidence, to listen to reason and apply law dispassionately, but he understood immediately that this moment transcended logic. The innocence of a child, coupled with clarity of heart, had suddenly altered the courtroom dynamic. He adjusted his glasses and made a silent note in his mind. This was extraordinary. The gallery murmured softly, but even their whispers felt reverent, restrained by the impact of those 2 small words. Emily's mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, unable to hide her tears. Across the room, Daniel's father furrowed his brow, a mixture of surprise and reflection crossing his face. Even some of the most skeptical observers could not resist the truth of the moment. Children, in their purity, sometimes spoke truths adults could not see or say. Margaret, Emily's lawyer, exhaled softly. Her mind raced with strategy, but it was impossible to ignore the human weight of Lily's words. They were evidence in a way no affidavit, witness testimony, or financial record could replicate. They carried a depth of emotion, a truth that only a child could convey, love, comfort, and the unshakable bond between mother and child. Margaret gently touched Emily's arm, whispering, This changes everything. Listen to her heart. It's all we ever needed." Emily held Lily close, stroking her hair gently, her tears falling freely now. "You're so brave, baby," she whispered. Lily, unaware of the courtroom's intensity, clutched Max even tighter. To her it had been simple. She loved her mother and she wanted to stay with her. She had said what she felt, not realizing the impact it would have, but her instinct was perfect, honest, and true. Daniel's lawyer, who had been preparing the next series of rebuttals, paused. His pen hovered over his notepad, forgotten. Even in a professional courtroom, he could not ignore the emotional magnitude of what had just occurred. Arguments about structure, stability, and schedules now seemed almost hollow. Here was a living testament of attachment and preference, a reminder that legal strategy sometimes bows to truth and love. Max, the small stuffed dog, remained pressed against Lily's chest, as if silently witnessing the effect of those words. In the simplicity of a toddler's perspective, the courtroom's complexities, the rules, the lawyer's arguments, the gavel's authority were irrelevant. All that mattered was love, safety, and the clarity of a child's heart. And in that clarity, everyone in the room felt a profound shift. Judge Harmon cleared his throat, his voice calm but deliberate. "Thank you, Lily," he said softly, his eyes gentle. "I understand what you're telling me. He paused, letting the weight of the child's words settle over the courtroom. "Your honesty is important, and I promise I will take it into account." His words, measured but respectful, underscored the significance of what had just occurred. It was not just a statement, it was a revelation. The spectators leaned forward, some dabbing at their eyes, others silently nodding. The reporters, momentarily abandoning notes and legal jargon, whispered among themselves. One photographer quietly snapped a photo, capturing the image of Emily embracing Lily, Max tucked under her arm, the embodiment of innocence and truth. This was no longer a simple custody hearing. It was a testament to the power of a child's voice. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. He respected the law, understood the process, and had hoped to present the strongest case possible. Yet here before him, a 3-year-old had expressed a preference so clear, so deeply human, that it demanded recognition. He felt a mixture of humility and reflection. Perhaps he had underestimated the weight of emotional truth in a child's expression. Perhaps he had forgotten that love, not logic alone, guides decisions that affect young hearts. Emily's tears had begun to fall freely, but she smiled through them, holding Lily close. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "You told the truth. Mommy's so proud of you." Lily's eyes widened briefly, sensing that her words had meaning, though she did not fully comprehend the impact they had just caused. Her small hand patted Emily's arm, as if confirming silently that everything was all right. Margaret rose slightly, her voice calm but firm as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor, while evidence has been presented in great detail, this moment demonstrates the genuine, loving attachment between Emily and Lily. It is clear, undeniable, and reflects Lily's emotional needs in a way no written testimony can capture." The courtroom listened, captivated by the eloquence paired with the undeniable truth of Lily's words. Daniel's lawyer opened his mouth, intending to respond, but paused. The weight of the moment was unmistakable. Arguments seemed almost secondary now, overtaken by the sheer power of what a small child had expressed. Legal maneuvering could not erase emotional truth, and he knew it. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the impact, while carefully preparing for the next phase of the proceedings. The gallery remained silent, the air heavy with reflection. Emily's mother clutched a handkerchief, her eyes fixed on Lily, marveling at the courage and clarity of such a young child. Daniel's father leaned forward slightly, a thoughtful expression softening his stern features. The courtroom, usually a theater of procedure and logic, had become something more, a stage for honesty, vulnerability, and the profound effect of a child's heart. Even Judge Harmon seemed moved, though his expression remained composed. He made subtle notes, aware that the next steps in the case would carry the weight of this moment. Legal precedent, schedules, and statutes mattered, but Lily's words had shifted the focus, highlighting the fundamental truth that custody decisions revolve not merely around practicality, but around love, attachment, and the welfare of a child. Emily continued to hold Lily, whispering quiet reassurances, while Daniel watched, silent but reflective. Everyone in the room had witnessed a rare phenomenon, a child's voice reshaping the energy of a legal space. 2 simple words, spoken with honesty and courage, had unsettled assumptions, softened hearts, and brought clarity in a situation clouded by complexity and tension. And in that shared silence, one undeniable truth emerged. Love, expressed authentically, carries a force that even the most structured arguments cannot counter. Lily, unaware of the magnitude of her action, had reminded the adults around her that sometimes the smallest voice can carry the greatest weight. The courtroom had been transformed, forever marked by 2 words spoken from the heart. "Mom, please." The courtroom had been transformed. A simple, quiet hearing had become something almost sacred, as if Lily's 2 words, "Mom, please," had infused the room with a new sense of awareness. Spectators shifted in their seats, no longer simply observers but participants in a moment of raw human truth. Whispered exclamations and subtle nods spread quietly through the audience, a wave of acknowledgement that went beyond the law. Children's innocence, it seemed, could pierce even the most carefully structured adult world. Emily sat frozen, holding Lily close. The little girl's head rested lightly against her shoulder, Max pressed firmly under her arm. Emily's tears flowed freely, mingling relief, gratitude, and pride. Her daughter, barely 3 years old, had done what months of legal argumentation could not. She had spoken directly to the heart of everyone present. Emily whispered softly, "You're incredible, baby. So brave. Mommy loves you so much." Lily squeezed Max and nodded faintly, sensing her mother's joy and the subtle acknowledgement that her words mattered more than she could ever imagine. Margaret, Emily's lawyer, recognized the shift immediately. She straightened in her chair, whispering to Emily, "This changes everything. You don't have to worry, the judge will see this." Lily's voice carries more weight than any witness testimony. Margaret's experience had taught her that judges appreciated emotional clarity, especially when a child's well-being was at stake. And here it was, undeniable, raw, and impossible to dismiss. Daniel's lawyer, however, tried to regain composure. He continued speaking in measured tones, emphasizing practical considerations, structured routines, financial security, and stable home environments. But even as he spoke, the weight of Lily's words hovered over the room like a silent counterargument. Each carefully chosen phrase suddenly felt diminished, overshadowed by the clear truth of the child's preference. The legal strategy that had seemed so confident now appeared fragile in comparison. Daniel, sitting stoically in his chair, experienced an emotional shift he had not anticipated. Pride and determination had been replaced by reflection, and for the first time, hesitation. He had come to the courtroom expecting to argue, to reason, and to present evidence in his favor. But here, in front of him, a child's voice had disrupted the carefully constructed balance. The clarity of Lily's preference had humanized the case in a way numbers, schedules, and statistics could not. Spectators began to whisper softly among themselves. Some dabbed at their eyes, caught off guard by the unexpected emotional depth of the moment. Emily's mother leaned forward, nodding in silent affirmation, while Daniel's father furrowed his brow, processing a mixture of admiration and resignation. Even reporters, trained to remain detached, lowered their pens, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Photographers snapped images, not of legal maneuvers or procedural moments, but of the tender human connection that had briefly illuminated the room. The judge, ever composed, remained quiet for several moments, observing the reactions of both parents and the audience. He understood that custody decisions, while legal in nature, were deeply personal. Emotional bonds could not be ignored. He made careful notes, acknowledging the sincerity of Lily's statement. She had not just expressed a preference. She had communicated a fundamental truth about attachment, comfort, and emotional well-being that could not be quantified or dismissed. Margaret seized the opportunity to strengthen Emily's position, but she did so tactfully. She emphasized the practical implications of Lily's words, framing them as evidence of the mother-child bond. "Your Honor," she said, "while structure and stability are important, what we have just witnessed is a direct reflection of Lily's emotional needs and desires. She has expressed clearly and sincerely her preference to remain with her mother. This is a tangible demonstration of the attachment that is essential for her development and well-being." Daniel's lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but paused. Even the most persuasive arguments seemed diminished by the presence of emotional truth. A child's sincerity, coupled with visible love, had shifted the room's atmosphere. He took a deep breath and adjusted his notes, realizing that this was a situation where legal strategy alone might not be enough. Emily hugged Lily tighter, whispering gentle reassurances, feeling a profound sense of relief. For months, she had worried about this day, wondering if her daughter could express her feelings, if the law would understand the emotional bond between them. Now she knew. Lily had spoken and everyone had heard. The courtroom had been reminded that, in matters involving children, emotional truth can carry as much, if not more, weight than facts alone. Daniel's demeanor softened slightly. He remained firm, but the sharp edge of his earlier confidence had dulled. Witnessing the emotional impact of Lily's words, he was forced to reconsider assumptions he had long held. Love, care, and a sense of security were as critical as financial stability and structured routines. Lily, with her simple declaration, had redefined the terms of the debate. Witnesses in the courtroom, some of whom had previously sat stoically, now reacted openly. Emily's mother dabbed at her eyes and whispered quietly, "She's so wise for her age." Daniel's father leaned forward slightly, furrowing his brow in contemplation. Even the court clerks, previously focused on paperwork, glanced up in recognition of the moment's significance. The room was alive with the emotional resonance of a child's voice. Max, the stuffed dog, remained tightly pressed to Lily's chest. For her, he was more than a toy. He was a symbol of courage and comfort. He had been her silent companion, helping her find the confidence to express a truth that few adults could articulate. And in that simple gesture, holding Max while speaking from her heart, she had changed the dynamics of an entire courtroom. Judge Harmon finally spoke, his voice calm but deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to acknowledge what we have just witnessed. Lily has spoken clearly and sincerely. Her words reflect her emotional needs and her attachment to her mother. It is my responsibility to consider these words carefully as we proceed. The well-being of the child is paramount, and her voice matters in this decision." The courtroom exhaled collectively, as though the weight of judgment had lifted slightly. Emily's tears flowed freely, but her face shone with relief. Daniel's eyes, though still serious, carried a note of reflection and acceptance. The balance had shifted, not through argument or intimidation, but through honesty, clarity, and the undeniable power of a child's love. Margaret leaned in, her voice low but confident. This moment demonstrates exactly why the law considers a child's preference, even at a young age. Lily has expressed herself with clarity and sincerity, which is more important than any technical argument we could present. Emily nodded, her grip on Lily tightening as she whispered, "You've done everything right, baby. I'm so proud of you." The reporters scribbled notes furiously, trying to capture the essence of what had occurred. This was not a story about lawyers or legal tactics. It was a story about human truth, love, and courage. Lily had become the center of attention, not because of her age or novelty, but because she had spoken plainly, honestly, and effectively. 2 words, so small, so simple, had reshaped the narrative of the courtroom and left an indelible mark on everyone present. Even Daniel, silent and composed for most of the hearing, could not escape the human impact. He had come prepared with charts, schedules, and arguments, but here was a living testament of attachment and trust. A child's honesty, delivered with innocence and sincerity, had challenged his assumptions and reminded him that custody is not only about provision, but about emotional security and love. Emily whispered again, her voice barely audible, "Thank you, baby. You've given Mommy strength." Lily blinked, sensing the pride and relief in her mother's tone, but unaware of the full magnitude of what she had done. She had simply spoken the truth, guided by instinct, love, and the quiet courage of a 3-year-old who understood more than adults often realized. The courtroom, now fully aware of the moment's significance, settled into a reflective quiet. Observers exchanged glances, some nodding, others dabbing tears discreetly. Reporters paused to adjust their language, recognizing that no words could fully capture the purity and impact of what had occurred. Lawyers recalibrated their strategies, understanding that the emotional dimension had shifted decisively in Emily's favor. And as Lily clutched Max, small and innocent yet profoundly influential, the courtroom absorbed a powerful lesson. Sometimes, truth comes not from arguments or documents, but from the pure, unfiltered heart of a child. 2 words, spoken with clarity and courage, had resonated far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The emotional ripples had begun, and they would continue to shape the decisions, reflections, and hearts of everyone present. The courtroom had quieted, but the atmosphere remained heavy with emotion. The echoes of Lily's small yet powerful words, "Mom, please," still lingered in every corner, reverberating through the polished wood panels and high ceilings. Judge Harmon leaned back in his chair, his hands folded over a stack of notes, eyes narrowing in thought. Years of experience had taught him that custody cases were rarely straightforward, yet this one felt different. The law demanded facts and evidence, schedules and logical considerations, but today something more profound had unfolded, a window into the heart of a child. Judge Harmon closed his eyes briefly, recalling Lily's gaze when she had spoken. It wasn't just clarity that had struck him. It was courage, honesty, and the unmistakable bond between mother and daughter. Emily's gentle reassurances, Daniel's momentary hesitation, the silent tears of witnesses. It was all intertwined in a tapestry of human emotion that no spreadsheet or chart could quantify. Judges are trained to weigh evidence dispassionately, yet even they cannot ignore the pure, undeniable force of a child, expressed preference. He reviewed the testimonies again in his mind. The arguments for Daniel had been solid: a stable home, financial security, structured routines, and consistency in education. These were all valid, logical points, and any court would consider them seriously. Yet, juxtaposed against these facts was the undeniable emotional connection between Emily and Lily, crystallized in those two simple words. Sometimes, Judge Harmon reflected, the law intersects with morality and empathy, and in those rare moments, one must consider not just the practical but the human. Thought about Emily. Her dedication was evident, not just in testimony but in the way she interacted with her daughter, the quiet bedtime rituals, the loving attentiveness, and the everyday acts of care that no courtroom could fully capture. Judge Harmon could see it reflected in Lily: comfort, trust, and a sense of belonging that was tangible even to those who had only glimpsed the two together briefly. He scribbled a note. Attachment, care, emotional stability cannot be quantified but essential. Lily herself lingered in his thoughts. She was so small, yet her voice carried authority beyond her years. It reminded him that children in their innocence often perceive truths adults overlook. A toddler may not understand contracts, custody schedules, or visitation rights, but she understands safety, love, and the warmth of a home. Lily had expressed herself with clarity that transcended the limitations of age. The judge recognized a rare form of wisdom in her honesty. He reflected on Daniel, too. The father had presented his case with precision and calm, highlighting stability and predictability. He was a man who clearly cared about his daughter's future, yet Judge Harmon could sense a lack of emotional resonance in his testimony. Daniel's intentions were sincere, yet they lacked the depth of connection that Emily and Lily shared. Judge Harmon noted this. Practical security was critical, but emotional stability and nurturing bonds were equally, if not more, important for a child of 3. Outside the courtroom, reporters were already drafting stories, anticipating headlines that would capture the drama. Yet Judge Harmon had no interest in headlines. His duty was to interpret the law fairly while honoring the humanity before him. He reflected that custody decisions were among the most delicate responsibilities a judge could undertake. Each ruling impacted not only logistics but the inner world of a child, shaping emotions, trust, and future well-being. Lily's words had crystallized this responsibility more sharply than any argument or statistic. He thought about the ripple effects. Witnesses had been visibly moved, and even the opposing counsel had hesitated, recognizing the undeniable influence of a child's voice. Emily's family was reassured, and Daniel's family had begun to consider the nuances of emotional well-being alongside practical considerations. Judge Harmon understood that these moments, the subtle shifts in perception and empathy, were as influential as legal precedent. Judge Harmon opened his notebook and began reviewing the day's proceedings carefully. Emily's testimony, the witness statements, and the financial records all told one story. Daniel's arguments told another. Yet amidst these competing narratives, Lily's small voice emerged as a clear thread, linking the intangible realities of care, love, and attachment. The judge noted, child's preference expressed clearly cannot ignore emotional bond. Weigh alongside practical considerations. He also reflected on the long-term impact of his decision. A child's trust and sense of security could be fragile. Custody rulings did more than dictate logistics. They shaped psychological well-being. Judge Harmon knew that forcing Lily into a home that failed to meet her emotional needs, no matter how materially sound, could have lasting consequences. Emily's devotion had been evident from the beginning, but Lily's articulation made it impossible to dismiss as mere anecdote. For several minutes, the judge sat silently, letting the room's events replay in his mind. Lily's courage, Emily's consistency, Daniel's logic, they all existed in a delicate balance. Yet one factor had become undeniable. The child's own voice had shifted the landscape. Judge Harmon knew that honoring her expression was not only compassionate but necessary under the law. The child's well-being and her clearly articulated preference could not be overlooked. He also considered the symbolism of Max, the stuffed dog Lily had clutched throughout the hearing. Judge Harmon smiled faintly to himself, recognizing that this small object represented security and courage. For Lily, it had been a source of comfort, allowing her to articulate a truth she might otherwise have kept silent. Max was more than a toy. It was a tool of empowerment, bridging innocence with the extraordinary impact of a child's honesty. Judge Harmon tapped his pen thoughtfully against the desk. He knew the next steps required careful consideration. He would need to balance all factors: Emily's demonstrated love and nurturing, Daniel's structured environment and stability, and above all, Lily's clearly expressed preference. The law required him to weigh evidence objectively, yet this case demanded more than logic. It required empathy, reflection, and acknowledgement of a child's voice. He recalled the moment Lily spoke. Her words had not been rehearsed, coached, or forced. They had emerged naturally, a clear reflection of her needs and desires. "Mom, please," she had said, and the courtroom had responded. Adults had softened, arguments had shifted, and the balance of perception had tilted. Judge Harmon recognized that children, even at 3, could be remarkably perceptive. Their insight, though simple in expression, could carry profound implications for their lives. Taking a deep breath, the judge made a final note. Proceed with weight of child's expressed preference. Consider emotional security as paramount. Incorporate practical stability but recognize primary factor, well-being and attachment. He leaned back, letting the gravity of the decision settle around him. Every custody case had stakes, but this one had revealed something deeper: the invisible thread connecting love, voice, and choice, embodied in a child's courage. Finally, Judge Harmon rose slightly, straightening his robe. The courtroom would reconvene, and he would deliver the ruling in full awareness of what had occurred. He knew the decision would honor the law, but also the humanity and insight revealed by a tiny voice that had spoken with extraordinary clarity. Lily, 3 years old, had not only expressed a preference. She had reminded everyone present of the ultimate purpose of custody law: the protection, care, and emotional well-being of the child. As the judge prepared to signal the continuation of proceedings, Emily held Lily close, unaware of the depth of reflection occurring just a few feet away. Daniel adjusted his posture, aware that the balance of the courtroom had shifted in a subtle, undeniable way. The spectators remained quiet, sensing that the next moments would carry the weight of both legal authority and emotional truth. Judge Harmon tapped the gavel lightly. "We will reconvene shortly," he said, his voice measured, calm, yet carrying the weight of responsibility. "All considerations have been noted, and I will proceed with care in reaching a decision that prioritizes the child's welfare." Outside the courtroom, the world moved on, unaware of the extraordinary moment unfolding within. But inside, in that quiet space filled with tension, hope, and human vulnerability, a profound truth had been acknowledged. Sometimes the voice of a child, simple and unadorned, is the clearest guide of all. Judge Harmon paused one final time, letting the memory of Lily's words settle fully in his mind. "Mom, please." It was a reminder that truth, love, and courage often emerge in the most unexpected forms, and that the responsibility of adults is not only to enforce law, but to honor the human heart. The courtroom was still, the tension thick enough to feel as though it could be sliced with a knife. Every person present, from the lawyers to the spectators, sensed the gravity of what was about to happen. Judge Harmon adjusted his glasses and tapped lightly on his desk, drawing the room's attention. His voice, calm but authoritative, carried across the hushed chamber. After careful consideration of all evidence, testimony, and most importantly the expressed wishes of the child, he paused, letting the words resonate. I have reached a decision regarding the custody of Lily. Emily's hands tightened around her daughter. Her breath caught, her heart pounding like a drumbeat against her chest. Lily, still clutching Max, looked up at her mother, unaware that she had just tipped the scales of an entire courtroom with two simple words, "Mom, please." The judge continued, his tone deliberate, steady, and filled with the authority of experience. Lily is a bright, sensitive, and perceptive child. At 3 years old, she has demonstrated clarity in expressing her emotional needs. Her bond with her mother is evident, strong, and nurturing. While the father provides a stable and structured environment, it is the mother who has consistently provided the emotional security and daily care critical for a child of this age. A ripple of emotion passed through the courtroom. Emily's mother dabbed at her eyes, tears streaming freely. Daniel's father leaned forward slightly, his expression a mixture of surprise and quiet acceptance. Even the court reporters, trained to remain impartial, felt a tug at their hearts, recognizing the profound significance of what was unfolding. Judge Harmon paused briefly, then added, "The court acknowledges the father's dedication and the stability he provides, and recognizes his genuine concern for Lily's welfare. However, the primary consideration in determining custody is the child's well-being and emotional security. In this instance, the child's clearly expressed preference, coupled with the nurturing environment provided by her mother, must be given substantial weight." Emily's grip on Lily tightened. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Every syllable the judge spoke resonated deeply with the human experience of care, love, and responsibility. Months of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty condensed into a single, pivotal moment. Emily's eyes locked on Lily's, whispering without words, "You did it, baby. You spoke and the world heard you." Judge Harmon continued, his voice unwavering. "Therefore, custody of Lily will be awarded primarily to her mother, Emily. The father, Daniel, will be granted visitation rights, including scheduled weekends, holidays, and any mutually agreed-upon special occasions. It is the hope of this court that both parents will collaborate in supporting Lily's continued growth, development, and emotional well-being." The courtroom erupted quietly, a mixture of relief, tears, and restrained applause. Emily pressed a kiss to Lily's hair, whispering softly, "We're going to be okay, baby. You're safe and we're together." Lily blinked, still absorbing the scene, her small fingers clutching Max, her stuffed dog, as though he too were part of the victory. Daniel sat quietly, processing the decision. He had been confident in the strength of his case, relying on logic, stability, and structure. Yet he had underestimated the power of emotional truth, the clarity of a child's heart, and the undeniable force of love expressed honestly. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the ruling with dignity. There was disappointment, yes, but also a recognition that the court had acted in the best interest of the child he cared deeply for. Margaret, Emily's lawyer, allowed herself a small smile. She had anticipated the moment when Lily's voice might influence the court, but the impact was more profound than even she had imagined. She leaned over and whispered to Emily, "You and Lily did it." The court listened. "Your bond is recognized, and your daughter's voice guided this decision." Emily nodded, tears spilling freely as she hugged Lily tighter. The spectators in the courtroom reflected the emotional weight of the moment. Neighbors, family members, and friends whispered quietly, some openly crying, others smiling through tears. Reporters tapped furiously at keyboards, trying to capture the nuance, the emotion, and the extraordinary circumstances of the ruling. This was not a typical custody hearing. It was a testament to the power of honesty, love, and the courage of a small child. Even Daniel's lawyer, professional as always, allowed a hint of respect to show. He understood that in the practice of law, technicalities and statistics are crucial, but they cannot replace the undeniable force of human connection. He subtly nodded to Emily's lawyer, acknowledging that today, the emotional truth had prevailed in the fairest possible way. Emily's mother leaned close, hugging her daughter and granddaughter tightly. "You see, baby," she whispered to Lily, "love always matters. You were brave and everyone heard you." Lily squeezed Max, her small hands trembling slightly, a mixture of pride and innocence. She may not have fully understood the magnitude of the courtroom's attention, but she sensed she had done something important, something that mattered beyond her immediate comprehension. Judge Harmon allowed the courtroom to absorb the decision fully. He added, as a final note of guidance, "I urge both parents to remember that custody is not a weapon, but a responsibility. Lily's best interest must remain the focus, and her well-being should guide all interactions and decisions moving forward. May this ruling reinforce the principle that love, attachment, and emotional security are paramount in raising a child." Emily whispered softly to Lily, brushing her hair back. "You helped us, baby. You spoke and it changed everything. Mommy loves you." Lily's round eyes met her mother, wide and innocent, yet filled with an unspoken understanding that something significant had happened. She hugged Max tightly, as though to share the moment with her silent companion, the small stuffed dog that had been a witness and comfort throughout the day. Daniel rose slowly, approaching Emily. He extended a hand, his expression calm but tinged with humility. "I may not agree with everything," he said softly, "but I respect the court's decision. I love Lily and I want her to be happy and safe." Emily accepted the gesture, a small but meaningful sign of mutual respect. Even in disappointment, he acknowledged the emotional truth that had guided the ruling. The courtroom gradually began to empty, the tension giving way to reflection, understanding, and human connection. Emily held Lily's hand firmly, walking slowly toward the exit, each step weighted with relief, gratitude, and the knowledge that they had emerged together, unbroken and stronger than ever. Max, still clutched tightly in Lily's small arms, seemed almost triumphant, a silent witness to courage, love, and the undeniable impact of honesty. As they stepped into the sunlight outside, Emily inhaled deeply, letting the warmth of the day wash over her. She looked down at Lily, her little daughter still clutching Max, and smiled. "We did it, baby. We're together and nothing can change that." Lily's small voice, barely above a whisper, echoed back, "Mommy." It was simple, yet filled with the purest affirmation of safety, trust, and love. Even as the courthouse doors closed behind them, the story of the day would live on. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest power, that courage can come in the tiniest packages, and that love, expressed honestly and sincerely, can change hearts, minds, and even the course of legal decisions. The sun outside the courthouse shone warmly, casting long shadows on the pavement as Emily held Lily's hand tightly. Max, still tucked securely under Lily's small arm, seemed almost to share in their victory. The sounds of the city buzzed around them, yet in that moment, Emily felt as though the world had paused, allowing them a quiet space to breathe, reflect, and simply exist together. "Mommy, we go home now?" Lily asked softly, her voice small but tinged with the curiosity and innocence that only a 3-year-old could carry. Emily smiled, kneeling down to meet her daughter's gaze. "Yes, baby, we go home, and from now on we're together, just you and me." Lily blinked and hugged Max tightly, as though solidifying the bond between comfort, courage, and the new chapter of their lives. Emily wrapped her arms around her daughter, feeling the weight of the day finally begin to lift. Months of worry, anxiety, and uncertainty had culminated in this moment. And though the court had been the stage for the drama, the victory felt deeply personal, an affirmation of the love, trust, and unbreakable bond they shared. Emily's mother followed closely behind, her face still wet from tears of relief and joy. "She's strong, just like her mother," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "You both did it, and you'll continue to do it every day." Daniel remained at a distance, watching with a mixture of resignation and reflection. He had lost the primary custody, but his love for Lily had not diminished. He had come to terms with the decision, understanding that the child's emotional well-being had to guide the outcome. Emily noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, a quiet acknowledgement that the bond between mother and daughter was not only evident but essential. He nodded slightly, a gesture of respect and perhaps hope that his relationship with Lily could continue positively through visitation. Inside their home later that afternoon, the quiet hum of domestic life enveloped Emily and Lily. Emily prepared Lily's favorite snack while the little girl ran excitedly around the living room, Max in tow. The day's courtroom drama felt surreal now, softened by the familiarity of their home. Each corner held memories of bedtime stories, laughter, and comfort. For Lily, the triumph was simple and pure. She was safe, loved, and home. Emily sat on the couch, watching her daughter play. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the nights spent comforting Lily, the long discussions with lawyers, and the anxiety of court preparation. And yet through it all, the truth had been clear. The bond they shared was unshakable. A tiny voice, a brave heart, and a stuffed dog named Max had made that undeniable to everyone who mattered most. That evening, as Lily snuggled into her bed with Max tucked under her chin, Emily sat by her side, brushing her daughter's hair gently. "You were so brave today, baby," she whispered. "You spoke your heart and it changed everything. Mommy is so proud of you." Lily yawned, her eyelids heavy with the exhaustion of a day filled with emotional intensity. "Mommy, love you," she murmured, her small voice carrying the purest expression of trust and connection. Emily pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, feeling the deep resonance of the moment. The days that followed were filled with adjustments, reflection, and the quiet joy of normalcy returning. Emily and Lily fell into routines that emphasized love, consistency, and security. Simple moments, story time, walks in the park, laughter over spilled juice, became treasures, reminders that life's true value was in shared experience and genuine connection. Emily often thought back to the courtroom, to the profound moment when Lily had spoken. She marveled at how two simple words had carried the weight of legal arguments, professional opinion, and months of worry. It was a lesson in courage and truth, an affirmation that even the smallest voice can have the greatest impact. She knew she would carry that lesson with her for the rest of her life. Daniel, while no longer the primary custodian, remained involved in Lily's life. The visitation schedule allowed him to continue forming memories with his daughter, maintaining a presence of love and stability. Though the dynamic had shifted, it became clear that Lily's happiness depended not on rivalry, but on collaboration between adults who truly cared for her well-being. Over time, Emily and Daniel developed a respectful communication regarding Lily's needs, recognizing that her heart came first, above all else. Emily also reflected on the importance of supporting Lily emotionally. A child's voice, she realized, is not always loud or articulate, but when nurtured, it can carry truths that adults sometimes overlook. She committed to listening to Lily, encouraging honesty, and fostering the confidence that had allowed her to speak so bravely in court. Max, ever the silent companion, continued to play a symbolic role, a reminder of courage, comfort, and the enduring presence of love. Months later, Emily and Lily celebrated milestones that felt ordinary yet extraordinary. Lily's first day at preschool arrived, accompanied by laughter, tears, and Max tucked firmly in her backpack. Emily walked her to the classroom, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You're ready, baby. Mommy is proud of you," she whispered. Lily's smile radiated confidence, a testament to the love and security that had been affirmed in the courtroom months before. Emily's mother watched from the sidelines, tears of pride brimming in her eyes. "She's everything just like her mother," she murmured, feeling the strength of the bond that had carried them through trials and triumph. Emily nodded, grateful for family support, but also aware that the most profound connection was the one she shared with Lily, unshakable, enduring, and pure. At night, Emily often sat by Lily's bed, reflecting on the journey that had begun in uncertainty and fear. The courtroom, once a place of tension and anxiety, now existed in memory as a turning point, a testament to the power of honesty, courage, and love. Lily had taught her mother a lesson she would never forget. The smallest voice can change the world if spoken with sincerity and heart. As they settled into a quiet evening, Emily held Max in one hand and Lily in the other, feeling the quiet strength of family. Life would continue with its challenges and joys, but the foundation was now unshakable. Trust, love, and emotional security had been affirmed, not just in law, but in life. Lily's words had altered the course of events, but it was the consistent nurturing and devotion of Emily that ensured the child's happiness would endure. And in the warmth of their home, filled with laughter, soft whispers, and quiet reassurance, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would navigate life's uncertainties, celebrating courage, honesty, and love along the way. Lily's small voice had spoken, the court had listened, and a mother and daughter had emerged stronger, united, and ready to embrace the life ahead. 2 words, simple, profound, and courageous, had changed the world for Lily. And as Emily held her daughter close, brushing her hair and feeling the steady rhythm of her tiny heartbeat, she understood something truly important. Sometimes, the bravest act is simply speaking from the heart, and sometimes that voice can shape a future filled with love, security, and hope. Max rested beside Lily as she drifted off to sleep, a silent guardian of innocence, courage, and the extraordinary bond between mother and child. And in that quiet, sacred space, Emily whispered one final thought, a promise she would carry forever. "You are safe, my love. You are home, and Mommy will always hear you." Outside, the city continued its rhythm, oblivious to the small miracle that had occurred inside their home. But within the walls, a family had been transformed. A child's bravery had altered lives, reaffirmed love, and reminded everyone present that sometimes the simplest truths, spoken honestly and courageously, carry the greatest power of all.